Greetings, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of Kaiju Curry House, the bi-weekly show that gives you a healthy dose of kaiju action. My name is Alex. I'm joined by my regular co-hosts and friends, Paul and Joe, but tonight we are joined by a full squadron of guests. Starting from David, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm David Brossoie. I work as a 3D artist at Limited Run Games, moving over from the games industry.
And Douglas?
Sorry, I don't know who you're pointing at. I'm Douglas. I'm the co-founder of Limited Run Games.
And Alex.
And I'm Alex Rushdy, the CEO at 13am Games and creative director on Dawn of the Monsters.
And we're joined by Matt Frank.
Hi, I'm Matt Frank.
Who's Matt Frank?
I'm a comic book artist and illustrator. I've worked on a number of projects, but for this one specifically, for Dawn of the Monsters, I was a character designer and promotional poster artist for both 13am and Limited Run.
Now, I'm conscious of getting all the content in for this tonight's special episode, but I feel like it would be an absolute travesty, Joe, if we'd not start off as we always do. So, Joe, what have Kaiju been up to? Very briefly from everyone.
Right, so what has Joe been up to? Joe's been watching lots of television. He has been reading lots of books. And I have been doing research for articles I'm writing for Kaiju Robin, which has been pretty fun. So happy times there. Alex, I will swing this right back at you. What have Kaiju been up to?
Well, I went downstairs to the living room. My daughter was watching Power Rangers, which slightly threw me off guard. Hey. And she said, "Look at this, it's really awesome. There's people in suits, you'll love it." I was like, well, yeah, you know me so well. Yeah,
nice.
Nice. So like, thank you for that. You know, so I sit down and she's watching Power Rangers Dino Fury. And what I particularly liked about it was, for all that it wasn't a recognizable Power Rangers for me, because it's like I think came out last year, it's the fact that my daughter's engaging with it, and then straight after she's jumping around, doing martial arts, she's launching off the sofa, and she's wanting to fight bad guys. And I thought, well, isn't that the spirit of Power Rangers kind of 30 years on? And yeah, so that was wonderful for me. Please, Paul, what have Kaiju been up to?
I'm still reading the picture book that Joe got me. So I've now read about the making of Aliens.
You've resigned to calling it a picture book, I see.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's got all the sketches, like, you know, the any artwork they did, the designs, some that were used, some that weren't. So that's quite interesting. I watched the Peacemaker TV series, and that does have a kaiju in it. Kind of, and
does it really? Like Assassin's Creed has kaijus in?
Yeah,
according to
there's
you.
like there is a kaiju, and they do refer to it as a kaiju. So they say the word kaiju, they say that's a kaiju.
Oh, well.
I'll give it a pass.
What's a kaiju in Assassin's Creed? This is news.
Yeah, that's news to me. Like, I wasn't aware that Leonardo da Vinci was over there making Mechagodzillas.
Paul has ways of drawing his gamer fandom into this.
Yeah, I was using
some of the connections are slightly tenuous, you might say.
But you could say that. But it had a Cyclops in, it had Medusa in. You know, it was kind of like, well, you know, if they're good enough for Harryhausen films,
those would be strange beasts. You wouldn't
be
be classed those in a regular
kaiju,
street corner. That's fair.
I think I win the argument. But enough about me. David, what have Kaiju been up to?
Let's see. I've been playing some Hitman 2 and some woodworking, and watching Godzilla clips with my daughter recently. She's been seeing me work on the Dawn of Monsters stuff, so she's been asking to watch Godzilla clips on YouTube while I work a little bit more often.
Nice.
Well, that's cool. Which Godzilla clips?
There's a good long clip of the end of Son of Godzilla, where with Kumanga and the praying mantises that she really likes. So we'll watch that one because it's got a good length to it. It's got all the good parts. So
nice.
And Minya, of course.
Yeah. And Minya.
Is that the good part? Is that the good part?
Yes. Yes.
It is. For kids, like,
she enjoys it.
I just remembered that Masaru Sato soundtrack, that while he and Kumanga are squaring up.
Oh, the drums? Yeah.
It's good. It's good. It's for a kid. It gets you all jazzed up. It's like, yeah, I'm fighting with my dad.
There were multiple monsters. That's good. So I'm going to go to Douglas. What have Kaiju been up to?
just watched all of what's available for Ozarks. Randomly was researching Ultraman because they had a bunch of the series on clearance at Best Buy, and I missed 2 of the compilations. And then I was researching, and I was like, "Holy crap! The Shin Godzilla guy is now doing Shin Ultraman," and I started getting freaked out and excited.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna rewatch Shin Godzilla pretty soon because I love the direction that movie took. Kind of a fresh look at kaiju. And then other than that, probably gonna watch all of Attack on Titan, playing Elden Ring, screaming, fighting kaiju in that game.
Yep.
There's enough
Too painful for me.
connection there. Yeah. And that's about it, really. And just otherwise working and typing tons of emails and slamming my head on the desk. I guess,
That sounds like a day job, to be fair.
yeah. What have you kaiju been up to, Alex?
Well, I mean, the number one thing that I've been doing is finishing Dawn of the Monsters, releasing Dawn of the Monsters. That's taken up, 90% of my brain power. But aside from that, I mean, I also have been playing Elden Ring, and I just in Canada when Godzilla vs. Kong came out, all of our theaters remained closed, and then they closed, or they were open for a bit. Godzilla vs. Kong came out and they shut down the day before. So I never got to see it in theaters, and they're showing it in Toronto at the Cinesphere, which is a famous IMAX theater, on Saturday. Ooh. So I nabbed a ticket to that because I want to see it on the big screen. And aside from that, just trying to stay sane in the joys that are launching a video game on 7 platforms, which is always fun. And Matt, what have Kaiju been up to?
Oh, Lord have mercy. Well, aside from the half dozen things that I absolutely cannot talk about, NDAs are fun. Let's see. Well, I too have been Eldening all those rings, which is to say, I beat the first boss last night after having the game for the better part of what has it been out for a week, 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And of course, trying to focus on that and saving a certain other kaiju-centric game for a YouTube video that I'm doing next week. Just that's been hell because I want to just play that. I don't want to die over and over again. I want to throw buildings at things, but it's fine. Let me see. Other than that, I've been working on a couple of things just for funsies. I've got a Primal Rage character redesigned thing I'm doing, really just for fun. But I'm doing that on my Patreon. Let's see. I have to glance over at my shelf and see what have I been rummaging through. Oh yeah, where'd it go? I have 7 different piles. Here it is. I'm currently making notes in my Behind the Kaiju Curtain book because I'm working on. I just read it. It's a behind-the-scenes kind of tell-all by Norman England about the set of GMK and Gamera 3 and a few other kaiju movies. So I'm making notes now because I'm planning on doing a podcast with him. And that is a really good book. I highly recommend that for anyone who wants to just read a fun little diary about kaiju movie production, kaiju film production. And I'm reading a lot of manga.
Matt, just to let you know, NDAs are kind of like stop signs. They're recommendations. You don't have to follow them.
Oh, that's
no, I'm just kidding.
That's really, really
yeah,
cute.
You can plow right through them, actually.
Yeah.
I actually had to position my camera in such a way because I have a dry erase board on this side of my workspace that has all of my projects listed on it. And it's can't talk about that, can't talk about that, can't talk about that, really can't talk about that. But
we used to have that problem in our conference room at Limited Run, and whenever we would have guests come over, I always have to look around my desk because I have research things laying around, and I'm like, oh god, there's too many clues. So
yeah, I've got all the really sensitive stuff on this side of the camera. I am working on that new Spectre-Man comic, though. Hopefully, get that out of the
That's exciting.
pretty soon. Yeah. It's been a long time coming. I had a meeting with those license holders literally when the pandemic started. I was in Tokyo when the pandemic started. And it was like, I remember going to meet the license holders, and my hands were so dry from washing them so much and using hand sanitizer that they went to shake my hand, and I noticed my hand was bleeding. So I'm
no.
oh, let's just do bows. So fun times in the pandemic. Go ahead. I don't know. I think we're done, right? Is everybody been kaijuing up to it?
That is everyone. But Paul,
Yeah.
are there any kaiju letters?
If you want to do Kaiju Letters, I've had something come through. Yeah.
I feel, Joe, should we? I feel like we should.
Oh, we always should. Folks
We
write
should.
into us.
No,
We always should.
And like they ask us,
Yeah.
to pose the
like,
questions. So.
We have a duty to the people.
Megadon and Ganira say do it.
No, there you
All
go.
right.
Yeah.
So what have you got? I've got one.
Okay, I've got one here. So Tom Tyler writes in. He says, it seems both Paul and Joe and many others have got into the kaiju fandom due to pre-millennial kaiju movies, which is great. But what if they only started, say, since 1998 Godzilla, for example, which is
This is dangerous.
I know.
That's an interesting
So-
question.
So if you never grew up, if you had no nostalgia for monster movies, would you be so enthusiastic if the first film you saw was Godzilla 98 and nothing prior? So there's been no Harryhausen films, there's been no Gorgo or anything like that. It's just Godzilla 98 and from then onwards.
To clarify, you're saying those movies don't exist, or they don't exist in your knowledge, or they don't exist?
They
in
never
this
existed. They
hypothetical
never
story?
got made. There was
They
no
never
monster
existed.
movies.
Well, then there would be no Godzilla 98. Like,
So America.
This is an alternate universe, Matt.
This is an
You can make
alternate
up the
universe
rules.
where
Just
America
work
came up
with
with the
them,
Godzilla
man.
I want to
idea.
see the math on that. I want to
Yeah.
see the physical. I get the writer of Singular Point. He'll tell us or not.
My opinion would be it sets the bar real low for all the things that came after.
Yes, so anything going forward you'd be really excited for.
Yeah, it's all up from there.
Well, to be fair, we had Peter Jackson's King Kong, we had Shin Godzilla, we had Godzilla Singular Point, we had all the MonsterVerse movies.
Pacific Rim.
There's Pacific
It would
Rim
be
as an original
good.
concept. There's we've had a decent run, to be fair, like of really decent
You can
movies.
even count Cloverfield. Cloverfield was pretty neat
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah.
Cloverfield was
Yeah.
very neat.
I think
Troll Hunt,
if anything,
Troll
we'd be
Hunter
more-
was good.
I think we'd be quite excited
Troll
because
Hunter.
it'd be a whole new genre at that point. So it'd be
Yeah,
like,
it's
oh, what's this?
Wow, what are these big lizards and or monkeys? Of course, I'm also just fantasizing about a universe where the kaiju fandom collectively paid attention to Colossal. So
Oh, we liked Colossal.
I love Colossal. I love that.
Great movie.
Yeah.
Colossal is a great movie.
Mhm.
Paul, what I would say to the person who wrote into you is, you mentioned Godzilla 1998, but prior to that, had there been Tremors?
Oh, this is
No,
how we
there
trigger
wouldn't- no, there
Paul.
wouldn't have been.
This is how we trigger Paul.
No, this.
So, do we need Godzilla if there'd been a graboid? Discuss.
I like how Alex was the first one to bring up
I
Tremors
know,
in this
I know,
podcast
I know.
episode.
I'm
Like,
back,
wow.
boys. I'm back. I think that we've had a kaiju renaissance, and I think that the amount of content that we've had from a wide variety of things, David mentioned Pacific Rim. I think that we've not just had Godzilla from Toho, we've had like a huge amount of stuff from all corners of the world. I think that's been great. So I feel like whilst I have my nostalgia for the 60s and 70s, I think there's been enough going that I can still love it in its own right for me.
Yeah.
I think that there's
people that grew
arguments.
up with. Oh.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say that I think the people that kind of grew up with that stuff now they're in the director's seat more often than not, and they prove themselves with other properties, and so they're given a budget and the time to make the monster movies look now how we like to remember them as kids. It's like the making of Pacific Rim really shows that Del Toro is like, I wanted to make this movie forever, and so it's like the respect and the talent behind the people making it kind of come together to give us all some really good stuff.
Yeah, well, even it's not kaiju; it's just a monster movie. But even like, how long did he spend trying to make Shape of Water? That was supposed to be a Creature from the Black Lagoon movie, and he spent like
Shape of
20,
Water is
almost
so
30 years
good.
trying to make it. So
Shape
It's
of
a
Water is
beautiful
one of
film.
It's one of those films that there were 3 times that I just remembered like just openly bawling there's just a couple of instances in a row where it happened. I remember it happened in Shape of Water, where I was just started weeping because I was like, oh my God, someone made a movie just for me and no one else. And then the same thing happened when I watched Bumblebee, because I was like, oh my God, somebody made a Transformers movie and it's not just a steaming pile.
When you said Bumblebee, though, my mind immediately went to B movie for some reason.
That's what he's talking about. That's what he's talking about.
He was talking about.
I
B-movie
clearly was
already.
very stricken by the emotional journey of Jerry Seinfeld as a CGI bee.
Like, damn.
Oh my God.
I will say Del Toro is a genius, because I had the same emotion with Shape of Water, and I had it with Pan's Labyrinth, Crimson Peak. He is just, that dude knows what he's doing, and it's clear he loves that stuff. And the amount of like stuff you don't notice, like in Crimson Peak, for example, like to show that a character is vulnerable, all the chairs she sits in are significantly bigger than her, so she looks small. And it's just like, and all the colors he uses, it's just like, wow.
Yeah, it's nice.
Del
I
Toro-
like his use of asymmetry. That's one of my favorite things that he does.
Del Toro makes movies for himself and the people who watch them and no one else, because I think his movies are great, and I know a lot of people think his movies are great, and then I'll show his movies to other people who I think would like them, and they're just like, I don't get it. And I think that's fine. I think it's fine that he just kind of makes whatever, or he just is like, I'm making this for me. So
That was a really nice letter written in. Like that was a good conversation. Joe, what was yours?
Right. So mine is pretty generic, but still it brings a nice talking point, and I think everybody here will probably appreciate it. Today's question was asked by Henry, and Henry asks, what is your favorite non-Godzilla series monster?
Graboid.
Paul.
Damn, that's a good answer.
Not the ass blaster. I'm surprised at you.
So there we go.
Non-Godzilla monster.
So they're just asking monster, not kaiju,
Like-
technically?
Yeah, monster.
I think he was implying Henry's 9. So I think he was implying
Flying kaiju.
I think he was implying a kaiju, but not from the Toho
Yeah.
cinematic universe. So I will answer quite affectionately the beast from 20,000 Fathoms.
very nice.
Good choice.
One of the first fictional characters to be referred to as a kaiju.
Yeah,
I believe it was the first.
I think it was the first because of the Japanese release of it. It was the first use of the word kaiju.
Yeah, they called it like atomic kaiju something or other.
Yeah.
No,
This is
I-
hard.
Yeah,
I was going to say, yeah, this is difficult.
I'll say one that recently kind of blew me away because I did not expect it at all. I went into the movie blind, was that Kristen Stewart movie, like water.
Underwater.
Underwater.
Yeah.
Yeah, the kaiju that shows up at the end of that, because it's I guess it's spoilers in here. It's Cthulhu basically, and you're just like, you don't know that though going in. You have no idea what's going on.
So my partner likes Twilight, or at least at some point she did. So there was a Kristen Stewart movie that came out, and it had monsters in it, and she seized her opportunity quite quickly to get me to watch it. And about halfway through the film, I realized I was having a much better time than she was with this film. But no, I really enjoyed that film. I really liked how the tentacles were kind of like where the human-sized creatures resided. And I thought that was like a very eerie kind of creepy thing. Like the tentacles, the underside is almost completely just like the human-sized creatures just latching on. And it really gives you like an idea of the scale and how screwed they really were. Yeah.
I'm going to say, yeah, the Kraken from Clash of the Titans. I feel like that had a massive kind of impact on me as a kid.
Which Clash of the Titans? Oh, well, as a kid, there we go.
Yeah.
Like if I could, I would throw my laptop out the window for that question. Yeah.
It is a shame that the director's cut of that movie will probably never see the light of day, the Clash of the Titans remake, because apparently a director's cut was a much better film. And it was more about like, yeah, Zeus is just a big old prick. Everybody kind of hates him, so the other gods are kind of going behind his back and like helping Perseus out. I'm like, that's a much better story than Zeus like flip-flopping all over the place.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm gonna say, like, straight up, while Godzilla is my favorite franchise overall, I gotta give it to Gamera. And I think like the seeds of that were planted as a kid when the trilogy came out in the 90s. But working on the Gamera set from Arrow, I got to really dig into Gamera. And now whenever I just see his big dumb face, I just get this warm, fuzzy feeling of just like, oh, it's my boy. It's my large son. And so I think I've got to give that to Gamera personally, just because he kind of gets forgotten about a little bit these days. And I think that's really a shame.
Yeah.
Bought the Euro set as well. I didn't know you worked on that. That's amazing.
Yeah, I did the artwork for the packaging, and also brought people in. Like I wound up becoming I wound up being credited as like associate producer on that set because I brought in so many of my nerd friends to work on it. But yeah, I did the art for that, and so I was admired in Gamera for like
I wonder how much
a year.
I wonder how much of your stuff I just secretly owned by accident.
I wonder that.
Yeah. I was gonna say Gamera, but now I'll say someone else because
Stole
you're
it
gonna
from
say Gamera. Because like Gamera's, I know sometimes Godzilla is a hero, but I always think Godzilla works better as a villain. And so
Thank
the
you.
fact that
Yes.
Gamera is, yeah, I mean he's the opening of Godzilla versus Kong, seeing legendary Godzilla actually kill people, bellissimo, you know?
Yes.
But I'd
I'm
have
just
to
gonna
say,
waltz into Hong Kong and nuke it. Yeah.
yeah, in terms of like, I'm gonna go really weird with this one, but one of my favorite kaiju designs ever is King Gessera from Ultraman.
Yes.
He's a
Yes!
beautiful creature, and
Oh.
he's got these big round eyes and these big puffy fish lips, and he's just bizarre looking in that kind of ugly cute kind of way.
Hold on, I'll go get my Bandai figure.
Yeah, he's good.
Wow.
So he's a great monster, and I mean I probably have seen more stuff with like Gamora and those other Ultraman kaiju, but yeah, there he is, King Gessera.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that kaiju.
So good. I love him.
David, I don't think you've said.
As far as like actual kaiju, because yeah, when Paul said graboids, that's,
Yeah,
that's
we're
really-
loose here. We're an
Yeah.
inclusive community.
I'd say it's any of the kaiju from like the first half of Pacific Rim I really liked. The other ones weren't bad. It's just that they made less of an impression on me because most of them were like underwater the whole time. But yeah, I just love that movie. So, most of my kaiju exposure is with the Godzilla franchise. So that's why I was like, oh, I'm not sure.
I guess technically Power Rangers counts too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are totally
Yeah.
kaiju.
I think Matt's
Matt, they are
switching
people
there.
in suits tromping
Yeah,
around cities.
Yeah.
If you can count graboids, they count. So,
If you can count Mechagodzilla, you can count the Dragon Zord.
oh,
Dragons are always Mechagodzilla.
Yeah, my brain. It's fine.
But what about this Godzilla Hello Kitty as my favorite? There you go.
That's
I love
pulling a
her.
hat trick right there. I'm telling you what.
Yeah, that wins. I think she wins.
Welcome. Right, let's take our first break, and then I insist that we focus on Dawn of the Monsters. That's the plan.
Hello and welcome back to Kaiju Curry House. Tonight we have the panel on Dawn of the Monsters, the fantastic new game which has just come out. So we're going to be talking about its recent release and what Limited Run have been preparing for us in this release. Guys, take it away.
yeah, we're really big partners with WayForward and a big fan of the games that they produce as well as the games that they like to publish because they have a very good eye for quality. Dawn of the Monsters was brought to me a long time ago by Adam Tierney at WayForward. He said, "Hey, this is a game I'm looking at. What do you think of it?" And immediately, being a kaiju fan, I was like, "I don't care what anybody else at the company says. I'm down." So like, let's figure it out and do it. And then over time, he kept on getting more and more info for the game and working with the team. And I don't know. It's a release that means a lot to me. And the kaiju fans at Limited Run, David being one of them. I remember, he was really excited, and he can kind of tell you more about some of the designs that went into the collector's edition we're doing. And then obviously, I don't want to take away any of the spotlight from the devs to actually talk about the game because that's their baby. But yeah, all I can say is the Limited Run team is really excited, and this is one of those games that makes like on a shelf. It's like clear that we have a great lineup because this game's included.
I think just to rewind for a moment, Douglas, like I'm a huge limited run fan, but for those of our listeners who don't know who limited run are, what is limited run?
Yeah, Limited Run's a publisher of physical games. We also now publish digital games as well once in a while, but our whole idea was to stop the eventual future of digital stuff only. We're big collectors. I mean, you can tell from my background. Does this podcast show backgrounds?
Yeah.
Okay. Otherwise, I'm just talking. Yeah, we're big fans of stuff. We feel like real ownership comes from actually owning things. The digital future scares us. Things get delisted all the time. Our whole idea was to help combat that, as well as we're all ex-developers. Some of us still develop once in a while, and we really don't like the way the industry was treating, developers in general. Like physical stuff was always considered too high risk. It was considered a waste of money. The way everybody was doing it before wasn't correct. They were like, I don't know. There was just so many things that we looked at it immediately and were like, theoretically, we could do this better. But to be fair, we were also like, we're going to be out of business in a month. So thankfully, we were wrong on that business part, and we kept on going, and it's been great. And I'm just really lucky we're at this point. I will say one funny anecdote thing that happened is when we first started working with WayForward, Josh, my co-founder, told me about how many units he wanted to do for Shantae. And I immediately said, "You're insane. It will never sell that much. Shantae's not that well known. No one knows who that is. Like, this is a obscure game, and boy, if I had to eat those words every time we release a Shantae game." And I'm just really thankful that I was wrong and that relationship has blossomed, because now we, like I said, we get to work with WayForward all the time, and they're just constantly picking great games. And a kaiju thing's something we had been talking about with WayForward for a really long time, and then they found the perfect game to be a part of. And that's the end of my rant.
No, well, thank you for that introduction. Paul, I believe you have some questions for our guests.
Yeah. I suppose when I Alex put a post on Facebook about Dawn of the Monsters, and I shared that, and we had a few comments. And one thing I didn't realise, because Limited Run, I've heard of you, but I wasn't aware that, for example, so we've got Dawn of the Monsters. It was up for pre-order from, I think, the 3rd of March. It's being released digitally on the 15th of March, and then your pre-orders close on the 3rd of April. But it then takes 8 to 9 months for you to actually make the physical product and ship it. So is that right? Or am I way off?
Yes and no. The standard editions will ship a lot sooner.
Okay.
The collector's edition stuff, because especially after COVID, materials are hard to get sourced. We do as much as we can on pre-production. With Dawn of the Monsters, we had done a lot of work ahead of time, so we're hoping to get it shipped sooner. But that's we're a very big under-promise, over-deliver company. So, worst case scenario, 8 to 9 months for everything for this game to ship. But in reality, a lot of the standard stuff will be sold sooner or shipped sooner. And we hope to get the CE stuff down. It's just, everything's so random now, it's hard to pinpoint.
I can imagine, yeah. So I take it most of your customers are probably double dipping, aren't they? Where they get the digital edition because they want to play it straight away, but then they also just they just like to have that physical something, don't they, for their collection?
Absolutely.
I've always double dipped.
Yeah, there you go. A lot of our developers have told us that their digital sales spike when we do a physical release, and it's because our collectors sometimes they don't want to open their release, or they don't want to wait for the release to show up, so they buy it digitally. Or they're like me, and I hate admitting this in public, but I feel like it's time. I buy the physical version, but my lazy self will buy a digital version as well, so I don't have to change the disc or cartridge so often.
Yeah. I mean.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna add to that by saying, even though I am getting a limited run version of the game, because as I worked on it, I just went ahead and pre-ordered one anyway, because I'm just like, yeah, but this way I'm sure to get it's just I'm stacking the deck as much in my favor as possible, because my just as a fan, my eyeballs exploded when I saw everything that was coming in the set. I'm like, give it to me now. So
I think, speaking as a consumer, what I find is that because of the type of games that Limited Run supply, because they are indie games, I feel kind of invested. So I held up N++ there. I have it probably on my PS4, I think, and I also have it on my Switch, but I have a physical copy as well. because it's that feeling of that I'm kind of supporting something which is unusual, and that's kind of why I like it. So yeah, I am going to get Dawn of the Monsters on Switch, probably a download, but I'll also kind of buy myself a physical copy. Will I get that physical copy off the shelf very often? No. However, it's that feeling of, you know what, this kind of matters, and that's what's nice about it. However, Alex, like, I know that you've been on our show before, and I've not had the chance to meet you until today, so thank you. But just in case any of our listeners today aren't quite sure what Dawn of the Monsters is, can you just give us like an overview of what that game is, please?
Sure. Yeah. So Dawn of the Monsters is a 2.5D side-scrolling beat 'em up, but it takes more inspiration from the likes of Bayonetta and God of War than necessarily from Final Fight or, you know, Double Dragon. Yeah, it's got 35 plus missions. It's got DNA augments you can use to upgrade and customize your character. It's got an in-depth story and world built around the world of Dawn of the Monsters. Lore archives, upgrades, all sorts of unlockables. It's kind of like if Platinum Games made a beat 'em up, is how I like to think about it. But if all the characters are giant monsters, and instead of picking up crowbars and trash cans, you're picking up fully dynamic destructible buildings and smashing them over people's heads and ripping off heads and doing all sorts of gruesome stuff.
Excellent. Paul, were there any other questions that we've got on our list?
There was one comment that I found the answer to on Google, but we noticed there's a lack of Xbox release. And is that something to do with Microsoft wanting a certain quantity? I believe. Is
that used to be true. We are officially partnered with Xbox. It's just the process is a lot slower. And to be absolutely fair, anytime we've carried like a partner's Xbox release, it's unfortunately the lowest selling title, so it doesn't always make sense. It's kind of like a title per title basis at this moment. And you know, I got to hand it to Phil Spencer. He's done a great job at nailing Game Pass down people's throat. And like people are just conditioned on Xbox to embrace digital, and that's fine. But there's definitely still a collector community, and we're definitely evaluating. WayForward is one of the partners we're actually mainly focusing on, like trying to do Xbox stuff. So you never know, in the future there could be a Dawn of the Monsters Xbox release. It's just we're going to launch stuff later this year and kind of test the market and see how it does. And if it's, you know, does well enough, we're going to put it out, because we're big Xbox fans internally, even if like they're not fans of what we do. You know, there's people obviously within Microsoft where we never would have got approved, but as a company, their focus is clearly digital, so they're definitely not like thinking about us.
Okay, so sorry, I'll just go back there. So you say potentially there could be a Dawn of the Monsters on Xbox later. So do you re-release some titles at a later date sometimes then?
Yeah, re-releases, it would be a new release technically on that platform.
Okay.
Yeah, so you know, sometimes we'll work with a dev and maybe they focus on a Switch version, and then later like, hey, Switch did really well, now I'm porting it to PlayStation, could you do a physical there? And we'll do it like that. Obviously, if we knew ahead of time, we'll just say, no, it might make more sense to release everything at once, but sometimes the dev doesn't have the bandwidth to focus on that, and that's fine.
Yeah.
So, yep.
So I have a question. How is it that Limited Run goes about kind of picking out a game and going, you know what, we want to release a physical copy of that? What's the process involved with that?
A lot of it, at least originally on, came down to Josh and I's taste. We made a wish list of all the games we wanted to do when we started. We started from there, and then we kind of just go and play games and decide like, hey, that's a game I like. And, you know, again, there's not a whole lot of, well, there really isn't any kaiju stuff coming out game-wise. So any opportunity you can get to work with something, and then it being quality is like a huge bonus. I think the last kaiju game I really played was, you know, I hate that it's worth so much money now, because it's really not a good game, and I played it a lot just because I had no choice. But that Godzilla PS4 game, had an insane roster, which was the one good thing about it. But otherwise, it was like the slowest drag of a game ever. But we haven't had anything really since then. So Dawn of the Monsters is a nice fresh breath of air, and I'm really excited. And again, the whole reason we're doing it is because it appeals to me, which is a lot of our games. It's just like, you know, and to be fair, not every game appeals to me, and we do have a large team now. So if there's a game genre, for example, I'm not familiar with, or like I don't play a lot, I will seek outside influence and then make a good decision there.
Excellent. Question for David. So can you tell us about your involvement specifically with Dawn of the Monsters?
Yeah, sure. So I do some design work at Limited Run, but my focus is 3D stuff. I came over from game development for about 10 or 11 years as a 3D environment artist. And I worked with Limited Run's sister company during that time. So it just really just a transition to focusing on collectibles and 3D items that are included with a lot of collector's editions. So I was unaware of Dawn of the Monsters as a title until people were tagging me in our internal team chat saying like, "Oh, David's gonna love this one," and thankfully they were looking for small minifigures in like a chibi kind of style to be made for
I
the
love
characters.
those so much.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure to work on that. I mean, and it was nice because like some of them robotic and do like some hard surface modeling, which I enjoy, but then what I don't often get a chance to do is organic stuff. So the Megadon model was particularly fun to do. So that was sort of what I was tasked with, just doing the renders for the announcements and making the figures that will go into production. Those kind of designs and stuff have always appealed to me, anywhere from like the old Godzilla movies to Robot Jocks to Pacific Rim. So that's my jam.
Amazing. Well, before we take our second break, David, can you tell our listeners what can they expect from the special edition release?
Dawn of the Monsters. So there's a commemorative coin. There's the 4 minifigures with like a little backdrop of like a destroyed city. I believe it's Toronto in the backdrop to go behind them. The collector's edition has this really cool like VHS aesthetic, which one of our artists, Steve, tackled, and he got 13 AM sent us so much good reference of like all these old cassettes. So he's got like stickers, like it looks like stickers are like doubled up on each other with some like fraying around the edges and stuff. God, what else? There's a soundtrack in there. And God, there's probably
character cards, a poster.
Posters, yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
Character cards. Oh yeah. Now, Matt, are you the artist that did like the cut?
Yeah, I did the Kaiju Anatomy posters. And
Okay,
I have the
those are
originals here.
awesome. And
thanks. I actually did a fun little thing where I had some vellum paper, and this is how I did the organs. I actually did a layover. If you can hear me, I did a layover physically of like how the organs mapped onto the different kaiju, onto the 2 different characters.
Those are really cool.
Thank you.
And in preparation for like joining you guys today, I checked out a few episodes of the Kaiju Curry House, and the Tremors episode was one, because Tremors is like my 1 or 2 top favorite franchises ever. And so I was checking out like the Arrow video release?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was like, I know that artwork. That's in the Dawn of the Monster stuff. And I mentioned it at work, and Steve, the artist who was doing the box cover, he's like, I have that Tremors release. And he's like, I didn't know that was in there. And I was like, you didn't even open it up, did you?
I as a quick anecdote, I got a lot of static. Not a lot of static. Like for the most part, the Tremors fandom was really cool. Like they really enjoyed the artwork I did for that. But I got a lot of people asking like, okay, but where are the Shrieker sacks? Like where is the Shrieker in there? And I'm sitting here thinking like, well, I mean, in universe, they probably hadn't fully dissected all the parts of the graboid first, and so they probably don't know what a Shrieker sack is when you're looking at it. So this is just in the context of the first movie, and then eventually somebody gives me a swirly, and I stop talking. But Alex asked me to do these anatomy charts because because I don't know what his motivation was, other than he knows I'm a big nerd and I like this stuff. But I had actually just gotten done doing very similar anatomy charts for the Eisenborg, the Dinosaur War Eisenborg comic that I worked on. And I did some dinosaur anatomy charts like that. And I was like, oh, so like these? And he's like, yes, do that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It was because we knew we wanted on pretty much every piece of the collector's edition to be an homage or a reference or a throwback. And I was like, okay, well, we got to do the anatomy poster. And I was like, well, who can do anatomy posters? And then I was like, wait, Matt did one for the Tremor set. Matt can do this. I messaged Matt on Facebook and I was like, hey, you
Yeah.
can do this, right? And he was like, yeah.
Yeah, sure. I just it was funny. Shoji Otomo, I believe, was the guy the artist who mostly gets credited for kind of creating that aesthetic from the old kids magazines in Japan. And so I always go back to his stuff. I mean, it's just gorgeous. And I feel like I'm getting, every time I do it though, I feel like I'm getting a little closer, and yet at the same time I'm like, it's not quite there yet. And I think it's because he actually is hand what's the word I'm looking for? He is hand doing all the little details that I'm just doing. Some of the details I'm doing digitally, and I'm just like, I guess I don't have 47 hours to spend on this thing. But still, they're a ton of fun to do. I love doing them.
The show's coming through.
Oh, I think it's time for our second break. When we return, let's hear a bit more about this wonderful game. And yeah, that's pretty much it, folks. Thank you.
Welcome back to Kaiju Curry House. Today we're talking about Dawn of the Monsters with a couple of guys and some mooks and some jerk from Texas. How's everybody doing today?
Excellent.
All right.
Matt, you were about to tell us about your involvement with this game and possibly some of the character designs, if you're not restricted too much on that.
Well, since the monsters are have not been publicly revealed yet, and since people haven't gotten the game yet, we won't go too much into detail. But Alex actually approached me a couple of years ago, and at the time I was pretty busy with other stuff. And admittedly, I get a lot of emails from people being like, "Hey, we're starting a thing. We're doing a kaiju-related thing. You want in on this?" And I was at the time sort of thinking like, I guess we'll see where it goes, because I'm being pulled in like 19 different directions. And when I saw the game in a more finished form, or a closer to, when I saw the game proper at G-Fest, I was like, oh, I got to get in on this. Like, this is just too cool. So I frantically started trying to talk to Alex, being like, okay, but like, remember me? And so I wound up mostly, for the most part, doing promotional artwork. I did the poster that was part of Nintendo. What was the name of the magazine? Nintendo Force?
Nintendo Force, yeah.
Yeah, Nintendo Force, which the poster came out beautifully. And then
it's also the icon on Switch is that piece, man. I don't know if you knew that.
I'm a special boy. That's exciting. And then I did the monster anatomy, the kaiju anatomy charts for Megadon and Tempest Galahad. But I also designed a couple of enemies that show up in the game, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but they show up as kind of mini bosses, right? And then they become regular enemies. But I tried to get weird with it because Alex sent me all these cool design directives. And I remembered one thing he mentioned was that the monsters, the aesthetic of the Nephilim is heavily inspired by ancient sculptures and pottery, specifically the statues from like prehistoric Japan, like pre-samurai era Japan. What are those called again?
Dogu?
Yeah,
I mean,
Dogu.
there's like the era. I don't remember the name of the era.
Yeah.
Dogu is the famous thing.
Yeah, and they have these very cool swirls and different, like, just cool little aesthetics to them. And again, I was in Tokyo, and I will pass through like a little mini museum in a mall that had a couple of those things on display. And I'm just frantically taking pictures of them. And then I used those as heavy inspiration for the two monsters I designed. So I try to get, like I said, I try to get weird with it. Like, still guys in suits, but like no arms. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. And yeah, I'm just, but just as a fan, I'm just excited overall.
I think, Joe, you've been very quiet this episode, which is quite atypical for you. And I'm just thinking, whilst you're not a gamer, possibly kind of your angle, you might kind of have some interesting questions for Matt and Alex.
Well, I do like the idea of a physical release. It's quite often remarked at our house that I'm always going off and buying the Blu-rays or DVD of something. And when there's a digital release, I usually argue back, well, they can't take away the physical release from me. Because it's one of those things. I think that on Amazon's terms and conditions, even if you buy something on Amazon, like a movie, that's there for as long as they deem, themselves, or they deem that they have the rights or the distribution of that film, so that can disappear. But I'm very happy that games are still being released as physical copies with collector stuff. So I will say that, because the last time I bought a game,
Mega Drive, SNES,
that would have been PS3 days.
Okay.
PS3. Wow.
I think
who hurt you?
Yeah.
No, it was just I don't know. It was just one of those things. I've always been drawn more to physical games, so I will be the guy sitting there playing Warhammer or HeroClix or Magic or something like that. But I like the idea of a physical release. I really like all of the things that I've seen that it's evident that you put in a lot of fan Easter eggs or a lot of nostalgia into this game, and I find that that's really moving to me, because in a lot of the new kaiju releases, like the films, like the comic books, what have you, there's an element to always add something new to it, and to do a different spin. Whereas sometimes you can just keep something the way it was and just be very subtle about the newness that you bring to it. So one of the things that I get out of, like, we'll use Godzilla 2014 as an example. So I would have been quite happy with a period piece like they did with Kong Skull Island. Or, like how Kong Skull Island had a lot of, like World War II moments, that were thrown in there. So I like the fact that, like, there's a really nice nostalgia center to this game. And that appeals to me. And while I'm not a gamer, I will certainly play it because I have children who are of the age who will love this game. But, like, that's one of the things that I'll enjoy, watching. And I really, like I said, I just really appreciate that. So one of the things that, like, it really drives home for me how lovely this game is that the characters, like the kaiju themselves, you haven't made any attempt to make them look like rational creatures. There isn't necessarily a biological directive behind them. They are fantasy creatures. You're quite proud of that. This is a large crab monster, and it is a, like, bipedal humanoid. It has 4 limbs. Like, it's just that's great.
6.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, okay. There's little dinkers on the side. Okay, my apologies.
I actually, I think it's to comment on that a bit, because I think you touched on something that was kind of core to how we tried to develop the game, is that in kaiju movies, there's been so many kaiju movies for so many years that at this point they almost have to bring something new. Like Shin Godzilla goes crazy, right, compared to other Godzilla movies, because they can't just retread. Otherwise it's like, well, I mean, have I seen this before? Is this really like we probably don't mind. I think we're all fine with kaiju comfort food, but in general, movies have to do something new or exciting to get butts and seats. But when it came to Dawn of the Monsters, we kind of felt like it had been so long since there had been a well-received kaiju video game that if we did something totally out of left field that was so unique, it might not be recognizable as kaiju, and therefore, are we really doing justice to the concept? So we had to try to balance. We didn't want Megadon to just be, Blue Godzilla or something. We didn't want him to just be a knockoff. We wanted him to be unique, but we also wanted it to be very clear that if you looked at this game, you would go, those kaiju remind me of what I loved as a kid. You see that from like Tempest Galahad is pretty unique, but you look at her and you're like, there's a little Pacific Rim in there, but there's a little like Mazinger, there's a little bit of this, that. You look at Aegis Prime, like, okay, there's a little Ultraman in there, there's a little maybe Kamen Rider. It's enough. We wanted to be very clear in our homages. Yeah, we wanted to give nods. We didn't want to rip off, and we didn't want it to be a pastiche or a parody. We wanted this to be a new world and a new story, but we wanted it to be recognizable. We wanted it to pass the sniff test, right? Yeah, I think there are some times where we were even arguing earlier on this podcast, is that really a kaiju or is it just a giant monster, right? There's a flavor to kaiju that is hard to describe, but you know it when you see it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that's exactly my words that I thought in my head, where you know it when you see it. When it comes to kaiju, there is an aesthetic to it. Like, I do. When we were talking earlier, we're kind of kidding around about, oh, with Power Rangers or those kaiju, you know, but it's like, whatever.
That really triggered you, didn't it?
It's not that it's triggered me. I'm so tired of people saying, is Clifford the Big Red Dog a kaiju? And it's not even a real question. You heard that on Game Grumps and you won't shut up about it. And but I do agree, like the aesthetic of it. And I also have to, I want to piggyback on that real quick with something. I have to give credit to Alex for really pushing to get a nice wide swath of kaiju artists involved. Like, you know, I mean, you got friggin' Yuji Kaida to do the box art for the limited run VHS cover. And I mean, I think that's my favorite piece he's ever done. And Kaida Sensei has done a lot of art. And, you know, y'all got Nishikawa to do a monster design, and it all lends this credibility, I would say, to it. But you also are encouraging the artists to think outside of the box and try some new stuff. And I think finding that balance is really important. And I think you guys nailed it.
Thank you. Yeah, that was the goal, is credibility. I want people in Japan to look at it and go, yeah, this is kaiju.
Is there a Japanese release planned? I can't remember.
We are planning one. We are planning to do a Japanese release. We haven't finalized it yet.
Okay.
But that's the goal. We've already received a lot of requests from overseas fans, from Japanese fans, saying like, is it going to be in Japanese? So we're definitely planning one.
It's interesting to see that dynamic, because more often than not, we're over here like,
Yeah.
Is there going to be an English release of that kaiju goodness on that thing? Yeah. We would like some of that over here, please.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest problems for me about being a kaiju fan is that A, we don't get all of the releases that other continents get, and B, it's the shipping. That's the common issue
painful.
for me. It's like you go, oh, I want that thing, that looks great, and you're like, all right, fine, you know, and then you add the shipping and you go, oh well, yikes, that's now 50%.
And then the customs.
Yeah, plus the customs.
Yeah.
And like, not to kind of whinge, but you do that has actually doubled the price of this thing, and I want that thing, but that makes it very difficult to enjoy.
Custom fees here.
I mean, I've still
You
got,
technically do get them. There's just a higher threshold before they
That's
kick
true.
in.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got some stuff that Alex over there in the UK is still waiting on, that he wanted me to autograph for him, and I'm terrified to send it because it's either going to be triple or quadruple, however much to ship it, or somebody in the UK Postal Service is just going to throw it in the garbage, which seems to happen more often.
Matt, just be honest, you're sulking because I asked you to do me a fan art Mecha Clifford the dog. That's what it was. It's like autographed.
You told me we weren't going to talk about that,
Every
and you're bringing up-
brushstroke is with seething spite.
Yeah, no, it was the autographed Tremors poster, what it was, which, you know, I every day I cry because it's not in my hand. But Alex, please, more about Dawn of the Monsters. Like, you know, I am so excited for this. What are you most excited for people to be playing when they actually sit down, whether it's with limited run or a digital? What are you most proud of for our gamers?
That's hard. I will say, I think we've been able to see a couple of playtesters, a good amount of playtesters grab the game and start playing it. And it's always one of the most exciting things about being a game developer is watching someone play it for the first time. And every time we've had a playtester pick up the game, there's a couple of things that happen. One is they walk up and they realize they can pick up a building, and then they immediately just throw the building and giggle. Another thing is because you start the game, the first level you play as Megadon to learn the ropes, that they'll then walk up to an enemy and then realize that you can rip off their heads, and then they'll giggle, and then they'll realize you can pick up that head and use it as a weapon.
I love it.
And so I just can't wait for people to experience it and just to like hear all the stories about all the stuff we've been planning so many things over the past years for people to experience. Another thing for me is, and actually I was on a podcast earlier today and I mentioned this, is we've created a really interesting world. I'm really interested for people to experience the story. It's something that's not as prevalent in the trailers and stuff, but there's actually quite an in-depth story, and a lot of human characters and things like that. But I also, a couple of weeks ago, I was like, you know what? I'm going to try and make a total list of all the Easter eggs in Dawn of the Monsters, all the homages, all the winks and nods. And it just got so big. And I was just like, this is going to be too much. I can't wait for people to point them out. And part of me was like, I don't know if anyone's going to notice, these subtle things. And people are already starting to pick up on them in trailers or material. So I am excited for people to start to uncover all those mysteries in all the corners of the world of Dawn of the Monsters and all the homages, because some of them get pretty obscure. So I'm hoping someone obsessive will go through and catalog them all in like a Wikipedia page or something.
See, now that you've thrown down that gauntlet, I'm going to have to play this game a lot.
I think you should.
Triggered me now.
This could be the game that brings Joe back to gaming. Just think of that.
Is Jamila a reference? Is Jamila's name a reference?
Yep.
Okay, good. I thought so.
There were people on the development team who didn't realize that until someone called it out on Twitter, and they were like, Alex, did you sneak in a kaiju reference into the name of Jamila? And I was like,
yeah.
Who can say? Who can say?
David and Douglas, as our limited run representatives here, what elements of this game do you love most that you can tell us?
I'll let David go first because I actually have more of a question for Alex and Matt that I really wanted to know. But David, if you'd like to go.
All right. Well, a couple things actually. As I watched more material for the game, I kind of got the sense that it played like the old Streets of Rage games or like the King of the Monsters games. And I distinctly remember, going to the Pizza Hut with my dad, pumping in a few quarters of King of the Monsters before we went home. And I really love the interaction with the levels that I've seen so far, kind of like what Alex said about grabbing buildings and whatnot. And I just haven't played a good beat 'em up game in a long time. Not that they aren't around. I just don't get to play as many games now. But as I mentioned before, my daughter, she's 5. She's been watching me work on the figures, and she's just super into it. She's like, "Let me see that shrimp guy again." Oh, he's looking pretty cool. So she and I are going to be playing that together, and I'm really looking forward to playing a game with her that is something I would play on my own anyway. And cool. I did want to make a note too. I'm a big shout out to the artists and then the art style for the game, because when I was doing the 3D figures at one point, we were wondering, I'm like, well, why don't they just send us the 3D models from the game and I can use that as reference, because I don't know what they look like from the back or and that kind of stuff. And we had a couple back and forths, and we're like, why don't they just send us the 3D models? And we're like, oh no, these are all hand drawn. We're like, oh god damn, they got me. So
we've tricked a few people. We've tricked a lot of people.
Yeah, it's really well done. So because I think the buildings are 3D, I'm assuming, because you're right. And so I think all the art style and the buildings kind of going across the screen, your art team did and I'm sure the engineering and tech art team have done a phenomenal job on the game. It looks wonderful. So
thank you. That means a lot.
One of the questions I want to ask you guys is obviously, you're sitting here playing with your figures from the game. You got the limited run physical release coming, the collector's edition. What does it mean to you guys having all this physical stuff? Does it mean a lot to you having something immortalized basically for you for such a really cool project? I would love to hear what that means to you.
For me, it kind of makes it real, quote unquote. It's like a dream come true, right? As a kid, I'd always imagine that I'm gonna create a kaiju universe, and we're gonna have toys, and we're gonna, I was thinking about movies. I'm gonna have it on tape. Maybe tape's a little outdated now, but I still have a lot of tapes. But yeah, so for me, I've got it. When we did Rumbo, we did a physical version of that game, and it was surreal to be able to. I'm holding a Wii U game, I'm holding a 3DS game, I'm holding a Switch game. That I made this. That's insane. We didn't get to do that for Double Cross, but for Dawn of the Monsters, it's not only are we doing a physical game, we're doing a massive collector's set with little figures and a cool poster and coin and trading cards. it's probably one of the not that I wouldn't have enjoyed the games that, like, I love the games that I've made, but this is probably the first time where if I never touched Dawn of the Monsters, if I was just Joe Schmo on the street and there was some other guy who directed it, I would have ordered this like instantly. You know, I think that's what's really cool for me is it's pressing my buttons very specifically. So
I'm always under the even though despite all evidence to the contrary, I always have this slight thing in the back of my head that I think a lot of freelancers have, which is, oh, one day this is all going to end, and there's going to be a man who's going to come to your door with a clipboard and says, okay, it's over, you got to get a regular job. So I stole that from Neil Gaiman. So I actually have a major impulse to basically have an archive of all the stuff I've worked on, or as much as I can physically get a hold of. You know, I believe I have a copy of every comic I've done art for, or at least and the covers and everything, or at least some representation of that. You know, a couple of the other, I mean, I even have the DVD release of that Asylum Monster Island movie that I did a monster design for, like, for better or for worse. But I think it, and just to put a cherry on top, I have the pinball machine over there in the corner of my studio, the Ultraman pinball machine that I did the artwork for. It took about 3 hours to get that thing out of off the front doorstep and into the house and set up. So yes, I have a major need for the physical representation of the things I worked on. Hence why I have probably several versions of the limited run release coming to me, because, and it's not just that I worked on it. The thing that makes me so proud to work on it is what I mentioned earlier, is that I get to share the space with some of my personal favorite artists and friends who also have done artwork for the game and done designs for the game. And having that all in this package is really exciting. And yeah, like Alex said, if as a kid you want to like you want to like make a kaiju thing and have there be toys and have there be books and have there be whatever. And honestly, between Dawn of the Monsters and a couple other original kaiju things that have come out recently, like a couple of different manga and things like that, I've finally lit a fire under my butt to go ahead and make my own original kaiju thing. It's something that's been percolating for a while, so I'm finally going to push forward on that. So thank you for the inspiration.
Yeah. And I'll say one other thing that makes it really important for me is, like, in terms of like family and friends, like, it's hard to show my grandma, like, here's this digital game I have on Switch. But like, I can hand her a copy and be like, I made this, and she gets it. And I think that's, you know, kind of irreplaceable to me.
Absolutely.
I've certainly found that, like, for every game that I've done a digital download for, if I'm honest, I can't remember what I was doing when I downloaded it or what was going on. And I know this sounds overly sentimental, but like, I look at my DVD and Blu-ray collection and my game collection from like my GameCube, my N64. I can remember what was going on in my life at that time, and it's like a snapshot of that.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about physical, but like, I have a connection to that time. I know that sounds very kind of sacchary, but like, it feels a lot more meaningful for me than, oh, that cool, click, downloaded. It's like, it feels a bit kind of empty.
Well said.
Yeah,
True.
I definitely agree with that. I assign memories to music, movies, smells, sounds, purchases that meant a lot to me. Like, especially back in the day when I was really into gaming and like always broke. Like, it was such an achievement just to be able to buy a game and, you know, play that to death for like a month. And it definitely feels as less personal when it's just a digital download.
Yeah, like to go into a friend's house and kind of like look on their DVD kind of shelf and go, oh, you're that kind of person. You're like, oh, you like those films, but you can't kind of like judge someone by, oh, what do you have on Netflix on your list?
Yeah, what's your watch
Yeah,
list?
it becomes kind of disposable. And this, I was just to that point. This is when I was 5 years old. I walked into Zellers, which is a Canadian department store that no longer exists. And this was the first Godzilla I ever saw, I ever got. And like, it kind of set me on my path in a way. So I keep it on here on my desk. It's a piece of history for me. No one else would probably care about a slightly broken old Godzilla toy, but I do.
Yeah. No.
I feel like
but
I
no,
have to comment here. Since you're all getting so nostalgic, I feel images. So we've created our own kaiju, and we're doing our own con. And not to steal any of your thunder, but I've got some prototypes that I can see within iShot that are super secret, as it were. And one of the things that they represent to me as a physical manifestation is everybody gets ideas. Everybody has something, or they were like, oh, I want to do this. I want to accomplish this. I want to do this. And a lot of folks, they don't do that. There are things that come up. There's life, there's all sorts of things. But when you actually have a physical manifestation of your idea that's not in your head, that you can show people, that's actually getting done, like it's in the world, it's not just in here. Because lots of people, I don't want to say just about anybody, but lots of people can get things in their head, but to actually have it in the physical world, in my opinion, that's a great leap forward psychologically, mentally, because in a sense, you've kind of made it, both literally and figuratively. You know, you've gone past that step where so many people fail. And yeah, to have a physical representation of your ideas is a really cool thing.
A wonderful note to end on. Thank you for that, Joe. I think that it's time for us to wrap up. Now, we normally end with, if nothing else, can we just very briefly as a group, starting with David, if nothing else, David, can you recommend something to our listeners, whether it's like a self-promotion or a kaiju piece of media that you think, go out and seek this out, it's fantastic. What's something precious to you, please?
Oh, that's really easy. Robot Jocks is available to watch on YouTube for free. So if you've never seen that gem of a movie, great stop motion.
Oh yeah.
I'll throw that out there.
Hell
Anything
yeah.
else?
Douglas, please, sir.
Check out limited run games.
Okay, well, to add to that, I'm just going to say, check out limited run games, but then check out what price things go for on eBay when you do not snatch them up in time, because I did not hit the trigger on Abe's Odyssey when that was brought out by new and tasty limited run, and I was like, should I? And I didn't go for it. And
that's a deep cut. That's an old one.
It was. Yep.
Go for it.
Yep. And Paul.
Well, I'll say once you've finished playing Dawn of the Monsters, and I'm going to throw out something that David mentioned, which is King of the Monsters, because I've got huge nostalgia for that. You can buy it digitally, I think, on all platforms. I mean, I bought myself a Neo Geo Mini just to have it on something physical, but you can get it digital on all platforms. So another kaiju game to pick up once you've got Dawn of the Monsters, of course.
Alex?
I feel like my team would yell at me if I didn't just recommend people pick up Dawn of the Monsters on March 15th. Put a lot of work into it. It's on everything under the sun: PS4, PS5, Xbox Series, Xbox One, Switch, PC, even Stadia if you want to stream it. And of course, we put a lot of work into the limited run games physical version, and I mean, it was one of those things where I was like, hey, here's the ideas I have. And the limited run was like, okay, just take them, ran with them, came back and was like, what can I say? This is, beautiful. Ship it. So, check it out.
Joe.
I will echo what everybody else has said. Totally check out Dawn of the Monsters. Check out the library from Limited Run, whatever you can snap up. I will also self-promote in this case. The Rondo Hatton Awards are currently going on, and they nominate a variety of horror, science fiction. If you're listening to this podcast, it's up your street. We'll just put it that way. But you can actually write in and nominate people. You don't necessarily have to pick from the choices that they give you. I will do an obvious plug for Kaiju Curry House in category 19 for podcast, but there are lots of other great ones. And one of the really lovely things about these awards is there's a lot of lesser known media and stories that you can vote for. And I think that it's really great to see that inclusion. So while you may not know every category, just looking at that list of nominees that they have shows you a great deal of good stuff that you could take, you know, from the genre, as it were. So I'm going to recommend that everybody take a look at their list and please vote for us. And yeah, that's me for tonight.
Well, finally, Mr. Turtle Man.
I like turtles. Let me say, well, obviously, Dawn of the Monsters, I'm super excited to be a part of it. I actually have been, because I do a regular Let's Play series on Rage Select, and every episode I've been doing the last couple of weeks, I've just been ending with Dawn of the Monsters. So you've got your advertisement there. But in addition to that, just on as far as stuff I'm working on, I've got a couple of new Godzilla things that are in the works that I still can't really talk about. I am working on a collection of the Dark Horse Godzilla comics being released in Japan, and I'm doing connecting covers for all of those. They are in Japanese, but you can order them internationally. And let's see. I mean, there's a laundry list of things like Spectre-Man Heroes and a few other projects that I've been working on. But as far as like personal recommendations for stuff that I like I said, been getting caught up on manga recently. There's 3 that I'm just all about right now, which are Super Women in Love, which is a story about a Japanese henshin hero, Kamen Rider type character, and the ex-villainess who falls in love with her. Love it, super cute, super bubbly. There is Kaiju number 8, which the first volume came out, and that's really cool because it's like sort of like Attack on Titan, but I don't want to sit in a corner and cry after reading it. And then there's Kaiju Girl Caramelise, which has been out for a couple of years, which is a shoujo romance comedy manga where the main character turns into a kaiju when she gets all Twitter pated over her boyfriend.
Hey.
So, yay! So that's my spiel.
Well, thank you so much for that. Joe, if you could sign us off, please.
Folks, as always, thank you for listening. This is us at Kaiju Curry House saying, keep it kaiju. Matt, it was really funny because I was watching you shake that figure up and down, and then you set it down. And you had like this forlorn expression on your face. I'm like, he just shook it. Something fell off, didn't it?
No, they're fine. I think that's just my face.
You had to stop playing.
Put it down now. I have to be an adult.
No, you don't.
Oh, that's true.
It's really
Matt,
funny.
do you want to welcome us back for the 3rd part?
That's when you bring in Gorgo, and then it's like, oh no.
Oh, that Gorgo is awesome.